at the end of the day, the things that we're delivering to production, it's not just code, it's not just processes, it's not just this idea that we had. It's taste, it's real engineering, it's effort that has to go into it. And I think ultimately what this allows us is it allows us to bridge different areas and silos within companies and produce engineers that are much more capable at understanding the customer's needs, driving with intent, and actually working towards a common shared goal.
Hello and welcome everyone to our latest Agile Boston podcast. My name is Joe DeAngelis and I am very excited to introduce to you a colleague of mine at Microsoft, Juan Valencia. He's a senior software engineer, and Juan has been on the front lines of Microsoft's adoption of AI right from the very beginning. So we're going to talk to Juan today about where it started and where it is now, and what are the great advantages that he has as a software developer. So this is going to be a really exciting talk. So Juan, thank you for accepting our invitation and being here today.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Juan, tell us a little bit, like I said, you were on the front lines. Like, where did it start for you with AI integration at Microsoft?
Sure. So back around 2022, 2023 was whenever OpenAI and Microsoft first kind of had their initial conversations. There was this internal kind of initiative where a few of us had access to the really early models ahead of time, just to kind of get a feel for them and use them and see how they could really be integrated into early Microsoft products. At the time, I was working within Microsoft Research, and we were focusing on a new application for different kinds of customers. And for us, the main thing there was that we had been focusing on how do we get smarter integrations to this product for a long time. So we were relying more on like traditional different AI topics, like machine learning for certain kind of medication prescription predictions, as well as one of our like hardest challenges was optical character recognition on pill bottles. So because they're cylinders, it's a little bit harder to get those actually going. And we had talked about all these different product features that we wanted to do. And then once we started seeing the capabilities that were there with even those early chat GPT like V3 models, it completely disrupted even what we were doing at that moment. So we had to sit down and really like take a step back and see what it we were going to do now with this product, that all the different problems that we were facing were now potentially not even problems. And even the UX of the app itself was completely different after that. So I've been playing with it, experimenting with it, using it from day one, basically. And yeah,
And you were skeptical, right? Because
it's
initially you were like, I'm not getting a lot out of chat externally, so why would I get it internally, right?
yeah, it's challenging because there's a lot of different things that it does very well, but there's also a lot of things that it does very well incorrectly. And what I mean by that is it's really confident. And so I think most people know that hallucinations have been around for quite a while, but experiencing those day one and seeing what that's like, and really it was challenging because some of my coworkers were very sold. And so getting kind of the level of healthy skepticism on the team back then was not as common as it is nowadays. And so there's a lot to kind of work with that. But even myself, like there's times where I fall in love with how the AI is working, and I'm like, this is definitely the thing that's going to change everything. To I don't know, maybe there's something here that I'm not getting, or maybe there's something here that's not quite there. And I felt that way for a while. I felt that way with seeing how it integrated into our IDEs. I'd been using it as a chat experience back when it was just a completions model. And I just wasn't really that sold that this was going to be something that was going to change coding itself. I always thought, yes, this is really helpful for design and thinking and just processing, but it wasn't until like I saw it directly actually change files that I had a moment where I was like, I don't know, this is definitely something interesting. There's something here.
Yeah, evolved from just an autocomplete to being a code generator and a conversation back and forth, right?
Yep, exactly.
So where are we now? I mean, what technologies are we using now within in Microsoft? And you had mentioned Amazon as well. You had some
Yep.
experience there.
Yeah, Amazon, I was at Amazon when the original integration into the IDE started kicking off. So back then it was Copilot. There was an internal tool at at Amazon that turned into Kiro, which is their version of their kind of Copilot competitor.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, like definitely things that I was missing because I had first gotten a little bit of the taste of Copilot at Microsoft. And that was the moment everything changed. That's where we really started to break ground onto like how do we actually make this effective. And to me, the GitHub Copilot one is just really, really well executed, and it's been delivering ever since. And so now we've gotten to a place where there's a whole ecosystem within VS Code, within the CLI, within very many different like areas where we can actually take advantage of Copilot. And it's a completely different world now than it was back then, but it's a very exciting world.
That's really cool. And I think right now we were talking before we recorded here about Visual Studio Code workspaces with
Mhm.
Afterburner. And of course, when I hear Afterburner, I'm thinking of a ZZ Top album. So I, it's my age. So yeah, tell us a little bit about how Afterburner really enhances your Visual Studio Code workspace.
Sure. So I had a few insights working throughout the years, and those main insights kind of came from when I joined the industry and also seeing how the industry evolved. For me, even before AI, having good context was extremely important. And I think back then, Visual Studio Code Workspaces wasn't really something that people reached for, just because the idea that a Visual Studio Code Workspace enables you is that you can have multiple repos inside the same kind of Visual Studio Code instance. And that seems great, but eventually there's a lot of different complexity that comes into that, and maybe there's a lot of content that you have to process. And so it wasn't something a lot of people reached for typically unless you absolutely had to. And at Amazon, they have a slightly different way that they build things. So they have a something called version sets, which is basically like a combined set of repos that they produce, and then they actually version that, and then that's how they ship it to production. And in those individual repos, the tooling there also revolved around Visual Studio Code Workspace. And it made sense. It was a very natural kind of cohesive way of combining the two. So that combined with one of my friends asking me, like, hey, I'm going to do a migration on this repo that I have. What would be the best way to do that? And thinking back, I was like, hey, you should put those two repos into a Visual Studio Code Workspace. And I even started working on something that revolved around compliance, where I had to do a very similar task of seeing how certain different repos interacted together to be able to actually like prove out the compliance effort there. And individually, it's challenging because you can only really see the service boundaries of a single repo. But when you start putting them into a workspace together, you yourself start to see kind of how things connect. But realistically, it's where Copilot starts to get that
Mhm.
visibility. And I've noticed that being able to put them into a single workspace, use that where I can enrich Copilot's context to actually get visibility across the board, just provided such a huge amount of like push that I wanted to name it something. I wanted to make it something that was more accessible, that was easier to use, because ultimately VS Code workspaces are great, but the tooling around them is a little bit finicky. You have
Mhm.
to really understand how to use them and how to add them and create them. And so there's a little bit of too much pain in the beginning to be able to use them. I said, why don't we make this simpler? Why don't we make the tool be something that we can create these workspaces in a idempotent and reusable way that we could then share with others to kind of solve this problem. So that's where Afterburner came about. That is one of the internal initiatives that I have that I'm trying to push for, that both solves this problem of bridging this internal use of VS Code workspaces, as well as creating kind of new and unique tooling that comes from being in that mindset, from being in that systems kind of way of thinking. And
Mhm.
so the tool today, what it does is that it's a CLI tool. It allows you to create these TOML files, which are configuration file, and
Mhm.
you specify the different repos that you want, as well as these additional folders. And those are really key. And then all you do with that is you can go and open the specific workspace just from the command line, and you have all of the different repos ready to go in a slightly opinionated way. There's a few different choices that we make to make it really work well. And it doesn't seem like much. It's not really anything crazy. It's not unique. Visual Studio Code workspaces are there. Like all the underlying backbones are built by Microsoft, realistically. And so all we're doing is just reducing some of that friction and trying to drive more of a pattern and a way of working than anything like really revolutionary. But the results have been very, very revolutionary. We've been able to like solve problems in production that we couldn't see on our own individually. There have been times where we've had like different production incidents where there are logs coming in, And when you have the traditional way of working, which is I just have a single repository open, which means Copilot also only has a single repository open, and you give it those logs, it will try to find out what's wrong. But sometimes those bugs exist at the connection of two services. And that's where that visibility is missing. And when you enable that with those workspaces, you can find the root cause in seconds,
Well, you're
basically.
talking about system level reasoning instead of
Yep,
just looking at a set of files in a repo, right?
exactly.
That's
The
amazing.
alternative today, right? Like there are other ways to do this. There's MCP servers, but I find that with MCP servers, there's a lot of pre-context that has to be added to the actual prompts, and that kind of eats away a little bit of what you're able to use with the context. But also the search semantics around MCPs also don't always work as well as you'd expect. And so having to do multiple searches within a repository and eating all those MCP tokens at the same time, it felt wrong. It felt like that's not something that should be happening for something like this, where we want to give it file like repo context immediately,
Mhm. Yeah, so it's way more efficient. You're burning
basically.
way less tokens, right?
Yep,
For sure. So, and you're building an AI powered development system versus just simply a copilot
yep.
at that point.
At the end of the day, we chose Afterburner because from an actual jet plane Afterburner engine, we're injecting fuel at the last little bit. Where Copilot's the main engine, we're just trying to get that last little bit of additional like power and thrust
Boost.
out through this additional tooling.
Fantastic. And I think you had mentioned there's an open source alternative called
Mhm.
Ergo. You wanted to mention
Yes.
that, right?
Yep. Ergo, it's short for like ergonomic. I've been wanting to use that name for a very long time, but it fits very well. And it's really just the underlying first layer of the tooling, which is that actual workspace component itself. And so I had worked a little bit on on this outside to kind of get something that was similar. It basically accomplishes the same things, but the goal is to have both an internal and external facing open source project that we can kind of work together and see how they evolve. There's a lot of different ways to take this, and I think Ergo's got a lot of potential that the Afterburner internal tooling does not necessarily get a chance to go and actually use as soon as possible. And so it's been a good kind of experiment to see how those two both kind of converge and also deviate from each other.
So at the end of the day, like what are your big takeaways from your journey over these last 4 years and where you are now with using AI as a sort of a companion?
Sure. Honestly, it's really challenging because there's so much out there about AI taking over our jobs and specifically like getting rid of developers. For me, I don't really see it that way. I think a lot of what we're seeing today is just a boost in productivity and the ability to get ideas out faster than ever. That's not really anything crazy either. I think that's also been seen in the industry. But for me, the main differentiation there is that we have the ability to prove these things out much earlier. And I think some people are using that to go and build these new tools and these new processes that actually improve their existing workflows. That's what I'm trying to do. And in that regard, it works really well because at the end of the day, the things that we're delivering to production, it's not just code, it's not just processes, it's not just this idea that we had. It's taste, it's real engineering, it's effort that has to go into it. And I think ultimately what this allows us is it allows us to bridge different areas and silos within companies and produce engineers that are much more capable at understanding the customer's needs, driving with intent, and actually working towards a common shared goal. And I've seen that be the norm at very high performance companies. I
Mhm.
love working in teams like that. And I'm really excited to see other teams kind of start to meld into that new process and that new understanding of the world.
Yeah, and I mean that's really it ties into the empirical process, the empirical model of trying something, getting feedback, learning from it,
Yep.
and AI can really accelerate that for you. Thank you. Anything else you want to share? Any last minute thoughts before we wrap up today?
Well, for me, the two main things are you can find me on valencia.dev. I'm working on kind of building a little bit more of a portfolio website there. So if you're excited into anything else that I write about, I'll have a blog on there as well. And then for the open source tooling, there's Juan 7732 on GitHub. You'll find Ergo and a few other tools on there as well. So if you're interested to see like how can workspaces work for you, and also how can you have a better systems level thinking interactions with your Copilot, definitely check that out. My goal is to turn that into a Visual Studio Code extension here soon, which will be a little bit more ergonomic for other people in using it.
Hence the name.
But yeah, exactly. And so that's pretty much all I had. And thanks so much for having me. I really appreciated doing
Oh,
this.
it's been fantastic. And those usernames and so forth that you put in place, I'll put them in the description in YouTube so you can all have access to them. You can get to them. So don't worry about trying to spell the name or anything like that. All right. Well, Juan, thank you so much for your time. Always been a great pleasure working with you over the years. And once again, you've outdone yourself. So
For sure.
until then, everyone, take care.